Boom! We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be, and of course, however you may be listening. I actually already recorded this before, but unfortunately, Zoom was having issues, or my Zoom was having issues. I don't know if this was due to the power outage or the uh, electronics IT outage that was going on half across the country, if not entirely across the country. I know Starbs was having issues, and a few other major conglomerates were having some IT issues. So, regardless, I got all the way through, and it was not recording. My screen was flashing, and for a minute there I thought that it was my laptop more than anything, but I think we're good now. So nonetheless, we are going to be continuing along the lines of the 2024-2025 Iowa Hawkeye football positional previews. And it's actually kind of nice because there's a few other outlets that are doing it. And luckily for me, they kind of started and had the same thoughts as myself as to which position groups to start with and go from there. I still think down the line, I'm going to do a video ranking the position groups. I think for the Iowa Hawkeyes, you have the top couple of position groups, you have that middle, and then you have the back end of the position groups. I think Iowa has talent across the board. I've said this in the other positional previews that we've done quarterbacks, we've done running backs. We're going to be doing tight ends today. The next video, of course, will either be wide receiver or offensive line. And for each positional group, why they are at where they're at is for a different reason. You know, you have some position groups that have a ton of depth, they have proven talent, and they have young talent. Um, I think, and then you have some groups that might have talent, but it's unproven talent. They also don't have a ton of depth, and they weren't super productive last year. Like, for example, the running backs, there's some proven talent, there's some proven depth by way of LaShawn Williams and Caleb Johnson, Josiah Patterson. They've all contributed in one way, shape, or form or another. But in the end, it's not as though they totally balled out last year and were one of the best running back rooms in the entire Big Ten. So there's still a lot to be proven there, but they do have the talent and they have a ton of depth. And so they're a group that could definitely catapult themselves past outside Iowa circles, insiders like myself that are totally and intimately aware of the Iowa Hawkeyes and their roster and what they have coming back and all of that. So they could definitely outperform. Now, bringing this back to the Iowa tight ends group, I think that they are definitely one of the better groups that the Iowa Hawkeyes have. I would say that they are in that front set of groups. They have talent, they have proven talent in Luke Lachey and Addison Ostrenga. And they're very lucky because there were some guys that were thrust into roles that had Luke Lachey not been injured and Eric Ald not been injured, it would likely have not occurred. And so now Iowa has some depth, guys that have actually seen the field that they otherwise would not have. Addison Ostrenga would be one of those guys. Zach Ortworth, who was a true freshman. Addison Ostrenga was a redshirt freshman last year out of the state of Wisconsin. He was originally committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes to play baseball. And I remember Addison Ostrenga directly because I believe he retweeted my recruiting video on him. And at that time, I had just started the YouTube channel. Iowa was in COVID, or COOF, the pandemic, and recruiting was different. It was not um how it is now. It was not opened all the way back up as we see now. And so Iowa, I tell this story often. Tyler Barnes, director of recruiting personnel, he stated that Iowa was not able to capitalize on their official visit weekend the commit or the prospects that they had visiting their school, because they were not as far ahead with those prospects that they otherwise would have been had COOF not been a thing. And so a lot of those prospects ended up committing to schools closer to home. And one of the position groups that Iowa swung and missed multiple times was tight end. There was literally 5 or 6 tight end targets that Iowa was in on. They were well positioned, but again, because of COOF, they weren't able to deepen some of those bonds by in-person visits because there were restrictions on recruiting. Whether all schools complied to them remains to be seen. I doubt all schools complied to them completely. Either way, Iowa was not as far along in their relationship with some of these recruits. 2 of them that come to mind would be Micah Riley Deckers, who was from the same high school as Keegan Johnson in the state of Nebraska, Bellevue West. And Iowa, of course, is tight end U. And it was thought for a long time that Iowa was the favorite to land his commitment. He was a high 3-star, borderline 4-star prospect, excellent size. And of course, he ended up committing to Auburn. Another tight end that Iowa was in on in the same class as Addison Ostrenga. I don't want to stay on this too long because I want to bring this back to the current tight ends that Iowa has, but I like giving you guys this lore that perhaps you maybe wouldn't have been aware of otherwise. Was Waukesha, Wisconsin tight end Andrew Keller, who was somewhat an under the radar recruit, as was the case with a lot of recruits during the COOF year. I think it was 2022, 2021. I'll go ahead and pull up what I'm talking about here so you guys can see and have a visual regarding exactly what it is that I am referring to. And Iowa actually offered 2 kids from the same school in Wisconsin, which honestly is a rare thing. And one of them, in Jack Dotzler, who ended up committing to the Iowa Hawkeyes, was, of course, a lifelong Iowa Hawkeye fan. I think his parents went to the University of Iowa or something like that. And he ended up committing to Iowa State. And again, he was favorited for a long time to go to Iowa. His teammate was favored to go to Iowa, but of course, he landed at Iowa State. So all of that is to tell you that Iowa swung and missed on several tight end prospects. Ultimately, the next prospect at the tight end position that they had come across was Addison Ostrenga, a kid that was committed to Iowa for baseball. Iowa somehow was able to check this kid out at a camp or a visit that he did. I think it was either at an Iowa camp or something like that. And they offered him a good old fashioned scally, and he committed to Iowa soon after. As you guys can see here, this is the class that I'm talking about. You know, Iowa still did end up doing okay with their official visits, but the major here, let me show you guys the tight end position so you guys can see. And I think I'm telling you guys this just to tell you that recruiting is a very interesting thing. And this is why when I started doing this a couple of years ago and I was doing Facebook Live and things like that as opposed to YouTube, I would, much like a lot of you guys, I would be emotionally invested in whether a certain recruit chose the Iowa Hawkeyes. I'm not going to lie to you, it still impacts me to a certain degree, because I want talented kids to choose the Iowa Hawkeyes as I'm a massive Iowa Hawkeye fan. But it does not affect me as much as it used to because I came to the realization that there are many stories like Addison Ostrenga. If you look at the tight end class, especially with regards to Iowa football, because Iowa is a developmental program, whether you're a 4 or a 5-star player or a 2-star player, as long as Iowa gives you a chance, they to be on the roster, they will give you a legitimate look and a legitimate chance to develop and become a player that is worthy of contribution to the Iowa Hawkeyes. So look at this. So there was in-state tight end Eli Raridan, who I believe he actually has been doing okay. He ended up committing to Notre Dame. At one point, he was favored to go to Iowa. And another key component at this time was the allegations that were levied against Iowa. Iowa was still, it was about a year removed from those allegations, a year and a half. But Brian Ferentz specifically was struggling to land recruits because other coaches were negatively recruiting against Iowa and specifically Brian Ferentz. And Brian recruited the tight end at this time, tight end position, relatively strongly. I think he may have even still been the tight ends coach at this time while being the Iowa offensive coordinator. So Iowa, of course, they swung and missed on Eli Raridan. I don't think he ended up even taking an official visit to Iowa before committing to Notre Dame. His dad, of course, went to Nebraska. So this is a story to tell you guys. This is some lore that you guys otherwise may have not been aware of. Just to let you guys know that just because Iowa misses on a guy, yes, it might suck. And yes, that kid may indeed end up being a really nice player like Eli Raridan. I think Eli Raridan actually is doing okay. Um, let's see what his stats are here. But in the end, Iowa, whoever they get, they are going to develop and they are going to turn them. Actually, he doesn't look like he's contributing much at all. Last year, he had 5 receptions for 51 yards. Now he's still young. He's a junior, but Addison Ostrenga had a better year than that. And this was his only year of contribution, 2023. So don't get too bent out of shape for it. I like you want Iowa to land the most talented players, but that's not how it always goes. Tommy McIntosh, Iowa had ended up receiving an official visit from him. They saw him as a wide receiver. I know he's listed as a tight end here, but Iowa was recruiting him as a wide receiver. He ended up committing to Wisconsin, and the guy hasn't even seen the field. He's now at Central Michigan. So it just goes to show that anything really is possible. Sorry to give you guys that platitude, but again, with Iowa football, whoever they get, they are going to get them in the program. They're going to develop them. They're going to give them the fundamentals. They're going to give them the tools to be successful. Andrew Keller, he ended up committing to Iowa State, and he was a high school teammate in the same exact class as Jack Dotzler. Micah Riley ended up committing to Auburn, and as far as I'm aware, he has not really contributed much at all for Auburn. So anyways, so that is a little bit of lore there. He had 2 receptions last year for 45 yards. So let's start with the newcomers for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Okay. So the 2 newcomers that Iowa landed. Well, actually, let's go back here. So as I was saying, okay, Iowa was able to build depth that they otherwise would not have been able to. And that is going to pay dividends for them this year, this upcoming year that's right around the corner, and the year immediately following this upcoming year. Because now that these two guys in Addison Ostrenga and Zach Ortworth were able to get early reps, they're that much further ahead. And when Iowa does end up losing Luke Lachey, they will be that much more ready to immediately replace the production that Iowa has seen over the last couple of years at tight end. Now, ultimately, hopefully we see more, because even though Iowa has been talented at the tight end room, and that's been the most productive room for the Iowa Hawkeyes on offense, we still want to see more. So Iowa landed in 2023 probably their most talented tight end that they've landed in a long time in Gavin Hoffman. I did a recruiting video on him. He's super talented. He has a 30-inch vertical leap, or excuse me, 38-inch vertical leap. If he only had a 30, that actually, even though for most people that's massive. For Division I athletes, perhaps it's not the most. The dude is a great route runner. He's from the state of Kansas, Blue Valley Northwest, and he early enrolled for the Iowa Hawkeyes, which is, the early enrollment thing. To me, it's not the end all be all, but it does help more often than not, because the sooner guys can get on campus, the more immediate they're able to begin Iowa's weight strength and conditioning program. They can gain weight, as this kid has already done. He's already packed on several pounds. They can get in the playbook, start learning the playbook, and start getting acclimated to Big Ten Iowa football. So this kid, super talented. Here's, since I have it pulled up, here's Zach Ortworth's recruiting profile: 88, 78, 5.6. So he was a consensus top 35 tight end. He had some strong offers. The problem, and likely and he went to a really good school in the state of Missouri, but he really did have some nice offers to his name. The reason why he, in my opinion, is not rated even higher is because he got injured his senior year. So bringing this back to Gavin Hoffman, this kid is legit. He is a huge feather in the cap of Abdul Hodge. I told you guys that Abdul Hodge was going to recruit well, and he has not proven me wrong. Here you guys go, Gavin Hoffman. He ended with a grade of a 93, 4-star, number 11 rated tight end, top 200 player in the nation. 247 Sports had him as a 92, as the 12th best tight end in the country. ESPN had him as a 4-star, and Rivals had him as a 5.7. So this kid, super talented, excellent get for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do for the Iowa Hawkeyes in the future. The other guy, it's kind of a yin and a yang in this class, is Michael Burt. Michael Burt from the state of Nebraska. He comes from a nice school in the Creighton Preparatory School. They didn't really throw the ball very much in high school, which is why he's not rated higher, but he's got an excellent frame. He comes to Iowa with excellent blocking skills, which, to me, he might actually even see the field before Gavin Hoffman, because at Iowa, when you're a tight end, you have to be able to block. And to be an advanced blocker like this kid already is, really puts him in a advantageous position. So he had a grade of an 87. 247 Sports ended up with a grade of an 89, a borderline 4-star tight end. Kind of all over the board here. 74 from ESPN and 5.6 from Rivals. So he wasn't as consistently rated as Gavin Hoffman, but I think that this very well might be the best tight end group that Abdul Hodge has recruited yet. They're both really solid guys with really solid offers. Gavin Hoffman had offers from Missouri, Arizona State, um, several other schools. Michael Burt, a lot of people thought that he was going to commit to Nebraska. He took an official visit to Iowa. He was the only recruit that officially visited Iowa that weekend. And a lot of people thought, including a lot of insiders, thought that he was going to pick the in-state Nebraska. But ultimately, Iowa was able to sell him on their vision for him. And Iowa, he thought, was the best school to get the most out of him, which I agree. If you're a tight end, you go to Iowa. I don't, even if I was from the state of Nebraska, if you look at what Iowa has done, not only as a team, but specifically at the tight end position versus what Nebraska has done at that, it's not even close. So those are the newcomers. Now let's take a look at some of the guys that will be contributing. I'm going to pull up the projected depth chart here. So as I'm pulling up the projected depth chart, Iowa was able to keep Johnny Pascuzzi. He was a walk-on. I think he will squarely be in the mix after this season, if not this year, to be a guy that receives targets, regular targets. Zach Ortworth, I mentioned him. So they were able to keep Johnny Pascuzzi. We talked about the newcomers in Gavin Hoffman and Michael Burt. Burt comes from Creighton Prep in Omaha, but picked the Hawkeyes over Minnesota, Nebraska, and Illinois. He literally had like all the Big Ten West school offers. And there's a reason for that, because he is a traditional blocking tight end with an excellent frame. They also got a few walk-ons in DJ Vonema and Cole Marsh. I like both of them, and I think, they have some nice skill sets to them too. Will they end up playing for Iowa? Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of talent in the Iowa tight end room, so it's hard to really say. But here is the projected depth chart. Starter, Luke Lachey, aka Luke Lackey. Number 2, Addison Ostrenga. Number 3, Zach Ortworth / Hayden Large. And then depth, Johnny Pascuzzi, Grant Leeper, and Gavin Hoffman. I do want to show you guys Grant Leeper's recruiting profile. He was a late get for Abdul Hodge. And he was a basketball player out of the state of Indiana. He has an excellent frame at 6'6". He was from the class of 2023. He came to Iowa as a gray shirt. So he would not be on scholarship in the first semester, but he would be on scholarship after that. This kid was a phenomenal steal for the Iowa Hawkeyes. How often do you guys find a borderline 4-star prospect that late in the process? But Iowa did. This is his rating from 247 Sports, top 30 tight end, top 10 player in the state of Indiana. So I think that this kid is a sleeper. I don't think that he will contribute this year, but I do believe that he will squarely be in the mix this upcoming year. Now that fellow Indiana tight end Cale Vanderbush decided to transfer, but I think that this kid has all of the physical tools to be super successful. And quite frankly, guys that, especially at the tight end position, that played basketball usually are successful. The thing is, as we wrap this up, the thing is that at the end of the day, all of these kids have excellent frames. They're all super talented. They all have what is needed to be successful. And I've told you guys this in the past, as a former Division I water polo player. The things that separate players at this level are of the smallest of margins. Okay. The difference between Luke Lachey and Johnny Pascuzzi is not as big as you would think. Okay. There's a difference, but at the end of the day, all of these guys are Division I athletes. They're animals. They are physical freaks. Okay. And so especially when there's a ton of depth, it becomes impossible to forecast who will play. Based off of what we saw last year, it looks as though, and I would agree with 247 Sports, that Luke Lachey, Zach Ortworth, and Addison Ostrenga will be the main three guys. Okay. Hayden Large might get in there a little bit, but I think he's probably going to be mostly a fullback. Here's Luke Lachey's stats the last 3 years. Yet he had a huge year in 2022. I think he could easily go past that. Luke Lachey should be shooting for minimum 500 yards receiving this year, minimum. So, just to wrap this up, guys, my final thoughts. This is a very talented room. I love the depth. I love the pieces coming up, the young talent. And of course, Luke Lachey, I cannot wait to see what he is able to do to put it all together. This is a guy that has been highlighted for a long time. He was one of the best recruits in the recruiting class that he was in. He, of course, comes from the state of Ohio and ended up, I can't remember if he ended up receiving an offer from Ohio, Ohio State. But nonetheless, he was a 4-star tight end. He was a fellow basketball guy, same as Grant Leaper, the guy that I just showed you. All the traits were there. He had the pedigree. His dad was a former Ohio State Buckeye. All the traits were there. So I cannot wait to see what Luke Lachey is able to do to put this all together. Had Luke Lachey been able to stay healthy, how big of a year would he have had last year? Who knows? It's hard to say because of how poor the Iowa offense was. But in a way, this is a blessing in disguise as Iowa now has Tim Lester. So hopefully Tim Lester can get more out of this offense, including the tight end group. What I'm looking for from a statistical standpoint, I think that as long as Iowa has a guy that's over 500 yards receiving and their second guy is at the very least approaching 500 yards, like in that, 3 to 500 yard range, they'll be in good shape. But I could foresee, Luke Lachey having 800 yards receiving and Addison Ostrenga hitting 5. If they can do that, this offense will be mightily improved. And you better believe that Cade McNamara is going to, especially early in the season, tight ends are going to be some of his favorite targets. So, and then, as far as the other contributors go, if they can, have a game here, a game there where they have a few catches and, they're slightly over 100 yards, 112, approaching 200, that'll be good. That'll be good. What we can't have is a situation where Iowa has all this talent, but their number one tight end, who is the leading receiver on the team, still isn't even over 500 yards receiving. We can't have that. So the bottom line is the top two guys Iowa has that talent. And it's up to Tim Lester and whoever Iowa's starting quarterback is to get them the football. Okay. Plain and simple. So, the final thing is, do I think that this is going to be every year we ask the question because Iowa always has talented tight ends. Is this going to be TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant 2.0? In a way, I hope not, because if you guys remember, Noah Fant was the top tight end going into that year. So what would need to happen is for Addison Ostrenga to catapult even beyond Luke Lachey, which I don't per se want to happen. I think Luke Lachey needs to be the number one tight end. Will I be mad about it? Of course not. I just want to see production, but I'll just put it to you guys like this. Do I think that we're ever going to see a historic year like we saw with TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant? It's going to be difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. What I'm looking for, I don't even compare to those guys. I'm just looking for certain numbers. I think Addison Ostrenga can have over 300 yards receiving minimum, and I think Luke Lachey can have over 500 minimum. And then can they both chip in at least 3 to 5 touchdowns apiece, that's what I'm looking for. So, and then after that, let the comparisons fall where they may. All right. Anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I got to get going to the gym here. Thank you guys so much for all you guys do to support this channel. Be sure to smash that subscribe button. At the very least, like, comment. You guys know the drill. Let me know what you guys think of this tight end group. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow and facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.